Hello, in this video we will talk about ecology. Ecology, the word eco is representing ecosystem or an environment where organisms live in, and logy is a word which stands for the study. So meaning ecology can be referred to as the study of the ecosystem. And also, if you take a look at this picture, you will see a butterfly on a leaf. So the leaf is a living thing. The butterfly is also a living thing. This is a plant and this is an animal. So the ecology is a scientific study of the interactions between different organisms and between organisms and the environment or the surroundings. The meaning of what I'm saying is, if you look at this butterfly and the leaf, the scientists will take the time to study the relationship or the interaction between these two organisms and how they are able to live comfortably together in the same environment. So that study, the scientific study of the interaction between these organisms and the environment also is referred to as ecology. And we should understand that in ecology, I mean, in an environment or an ecosystem, we would have two basic factors in it. One of the factors are the biotic factors. The word bio is representing living. So we talk about the biotic factors, or the biotic means about the living factors that influence the ecosystem. So, and when we talk about the living factors that influences the ecosystem, we're talking about the plants and we're talking about the animals in an ecosystem. So the next one is an example. Take a look at this picture, you would see the way all these organisms are interacting with one another and the way they are helping one another to survive in this environment. The biotic components of a grassland ecosystem are the living organism that exist in the ecosystem. Now, in this case, you would see the sun shines and the plants tap sunlight for the purpose of making their food. Some light are gone back to the space and they are because of reflection or because they are been exhausted already, they go back to the world, to the atmosphere, they reflect back. Some are also leaving some gases are being expelled from the plant after they already made the food. And we have condensation taking place here. The rain is falling from the cloud. So when the cloud becomes so heavy, it rains and the water sinks into the ground. Here you have insects underneath the ground. You also have earthworms. You have the rat digging his hole down deep into the ground. Then the water flows back to the water body. You've got plants around it. And all these things interacting with one another. In here, you can be able to know the living factors of it. Here is one of the living components. Another one here is one of the living components in it. This is also a living component in the ecosystem. This is also another one. These are all living factors of the ecosystem and all of the grasses here. They are the biotic factors of an ecosystem. Now, the abiotic factors means they're not living factors that influence the ecosystem. An example of that is the sun and the rain, which is rainwater. It could be precipitation, it could be snow, it could be hail. So they are not living things, but they have a great role to play in an ecosystem. For example, the green plants would not be able to make their food if there is no sun as a source of energy for them to make the food. Now, in an ecosystem, we have we have sections of the organisms. The organisms are divided into sections based on what they do. Now, the sunlight is the main energy source for life on the earth. All the living organisms on the earth depend directly or indirectly on the sun. Now, the way that depend directly is the plant travel the sunlight, the time they get sun energy, like solar energy, which will later turn to all the sources of energy from the sun. And that's the reason why the herbivores will depend on the green plants for food, and the carnivores depends on the herbivores for food. So this is the way one is depending on the other one for food. And but we should remember that the first organism in an ecosystem is the producer, and the producer gets his energy from the sun. This is the reason why we say a sun is one of the not living factors or not living components of an ecosystem. Now we call the organisms which are capable of making their own food, we call them autotrophs. Autotrophs, the word auto means by itself, So it means the green plant, they make energy by them, they get food by themselves. Troughs is called nutrition. So it means they get the nutrition by themselves. And this is the reason why we call them autotrophs. Whenever you hear the word autotroph, it's representing the green plants or the producers which are capable of making their own food from the not living things in the environment. And the way they make their food is quite simple. The green plant tap sunlight from the atmosphere, from the sun, and it also gets gases, while the roots will get minerals and water for the plant to start making its food. Now, the producers use chemical or light energy to make food. An example of them is plants. We have some plant like protists or protists, which we call algae. This is a major producer in the aquatic environment. And the bacteria are organisms which can make their own food using the chemical. We call that process chemosynthesis. We call that process what? Chemosynthesis. So, as I told you earlier, whenever you hear the word synthesis, it means the production. And what chemo means, production of food from chemical. So, this is what we got the name photosynthesis from. Photosynthesis means photo is a scientific word that means light. So this is the reason why we say the photosynthesis or the photosynthetic organisms, they are organisms that could make their food by the process of using sunlight as a source of energy for the plant to make their food. Now the next one we need to look at is the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis uses light energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and carbohydrate. This is the way to write the equation if you want to write it. 6CO2 plus 6H2O in the presence of light energy is going to give us 6O2 plus 6C6H12 over 6. So remember the formula very well. So this is just an explanation about how the leaf does make its own food. It's going to trap sunlight from the atmosphere. Then the sunlight will be converted to a source of energy for the plant to make its food. And carbon dioxide will also be taken in the water. Then it's going to release oxygen and glucose after the process. Now, chemosynthesis is a process by which bacteria use chemical energy to make carbohydrate for them to get energy. Now, what are consumers? Consumers that rely on all organisms for their food or energy supply. So whenever you talk about consumers, remember is a name used for organisms that depend on all the organisms for their living. They cannot make their own food themselves, so they will depend on what the producers, which are autotrophs, have been able to make by themselves. Now, remember that I told you that the producers, they are called autotrophs, and the consumers, they are being called heterotrophs. Hetero means different. Hetero means different. Troph means nutrition. So the meaning is that the heterotrophs are organisms that get the energy, they get the nutrition from other organisms. And that's why this is an example of a bull or a cow, or let me say a cattle, which is feeding on the grass, which is feeding on the green plant. The green plant is a producer because it can make its own food by itself. Then this will feed on it. This is an example of an herbivore. The herbivores are organisms which are found mostly in the second layer or second level of the food chain. That is to say, if you have a producer, you have grass, then you're going to have the next organism to be there is a herbivores. Example is the cattle, which we're looking at eating the grass. Now, the next one we need to know is that the herbivores obtain their energy by eating only plants. The herbivores get the energy by eating only plants, while the carnivores, they are organisms that get the energy by eating only animals. The meaning of what I'm saying is, even if the lion is very hungry and is finding grasses and plants around it, it's not going to go down to the level of becoming a herbivore. It's not going to eat grasses. So the lion could die of hunger even when there are grasses everywhere. And this we're looking at here is a caterpillar. The caterpillar is an organism that feed a lot on the green plants, and that's the reason we call them herbivores. And for the omnivores are organisms that can combine both the plants and animals as food. So we call them omnivores because they can combine two things. And when you say example of this is the bear, and we are also example, the man, the human is an example of uh, is an example of organisms that are omnivores. And another one we have is the decomposers. The decomposers are organisms that can break down dead organic matter to get energy for themselves. This is an example of a decomposer. An example of them is mushroom. It's going to break down. It's going to break down all the nutrients, the dead organic matter from plants, and it's going to use that as a source of energy for itself before it grows. So let's talk about the interaction between all these organisms in the ecosystem. Energy flow through an ecosystem in one direction. That is to say, from the sun or inorganic compounds to the autotrophs, producers, and then to the heterotrophs, which are the consumers. Now, the food chain is a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy by eating and being eaten. Meaning by eating is by when they eat, by being eaten is when other organisms eat them. Now I'm going to show you an example of a food chain. The arrow will have to go. This is the way. These are the stages or the steps involved in drawing a food chain. If you find in your exam that a teacher says draw a food chain, you must always put these things in mind. Among the things to put in mind is that the arrow should go in the direction of how the energy is being transferred, in the direction of how energy is being transferred. Now, it should start with the producer. And this is the reason I said, if you draw a food chain for me, you start with the sun, you're going to get the answer wrong. So it should start with the producer and end with the top consumer or a carnivore. This is a good example. You've got the grass, which is a producer. Then you got the cricket, which eats the grass. Then you got the frog, which will eat the cricket. And you have the raccoon, which will As I was saying, this is a good example of a food chain, like the raccoon is the last one on the food chain and is a top carnivore or is a top consumer, which is a carnivore. So if you draw a food chain and you start with the sun, you will be getting it wrong. And if you end in on frog, you would be getting it wrong also. So now if you want to label if want someone tells you to describe the organisms you already use for your food chain, you can say the grass is a producer, the grass is a producer, the cricket uh, primary is a primary consumer, which is the herbivore. Then the secondary consumer is either a carnivore or omnivore, but this is a omnivore. And the last one is the tertiary. The tertiary consumer is a raccoon. So this is the way to draw a food chain, and you must make sure you draw the arrow pointing to the direction of the flow of energy, not telling me the one that eats the other one. Please put all these things in mind. And this is a complex food chain, which is food web. We're not going to talk about that now, so we will continue from this place in the next semester, inshallah. I hope you enjoyed the class. Have a nice day.